So this is a story about two things that I love, books and technology. But perhaps it's also about a third thing too. It's about curiosity. It's looking at things around the world and going, I wonder what happens if. So what do books look like in a digital age? This? Maybe this? Maybe even this. But I think books have a lot of advantages. For a start, you can feel where you are in the book by the weight of the pages in your hand. And also, the paper is really lovely to read. It's so much nicer, and you can read much quicker than on a screen as well. But there's also the emotional connection we have with a book. You know when you get a brand new book and that lovely smell? Or even if you find a very old book and it's got that lovely old vanilla-y book smell as well. But there's a lot of advantages of technology too. You've got really rapid access to things. You've got instant connections. You can get things that you wouldn't have been able to get before the internet existed. It's fantastic. So I like both of these things, and I wanted to have a look to see if I could pull together a couple of the things that I like from books and a couple of things I like from technology as well. And this is what I often use when I'm making things. This is called an Arduino. It's like a little small microprocessor. And this is the one I use quite a lot. It's called a lily pad. And it's built to go into clothes to make wearables. So what happens when you put things into Arduino into things that you wear? So this is a project I made. It's a wrist-warming glove. And what happens is that the glove can sense temperature, and then the lights respond to that temperature. So when it's very cold, the lights come on and they flicker in a certain pattern. And as the temperature warms up, the lights change and then they finish entirely. So that's what happens when you put Arduino in clothes. But what happens if you put Arduino into other things? What happens if you put Arduino into books? Now, a few years ago, I didn't have a bedside light at all. And in fact, the socket for my bedside light was over the other side of the room, so it wasn't even next to the bed. So I didn't have a light, and I thought, well, I could buy something, but where's the fun in that, really? I'll make something. I'll make something from Arduino that's battery-powered, so it doesn't need to be plugged in. And what I wanted to do was make something out of a book, because I was thinking, well, I've got a book next to me, so all I'll do is if I wake up in the middle of the night, I'll pick up the book and the lights will come on. So the idea of this is that you can pick it up, you switch the book on by picking up the lights, and it works on its side or it ends as well. And the thing I like about this is the physicality of the book as an object. You know, if it's dark in the room, you can just pick it up and instantly the lights are on. And it's really easy to switch the lights off. All you need to do is put the book back down flat. So here's how I go about making these light books. First of all, first thing I do is find the right book. So it's got to feel right when you pick it up. It's got to have a hard cover. It's got to feel like something interesting, something you want to use. And I found this one I used. And the next stage that I do is I sketch out how the components are going to appear. This is the sort of draft sketch that I do. Then I put the components in place and start work on bringing it together. Now for this particular book, I wanted to modify it slightly even more, and I wanted to make new end papers for the front of the book so that I could hide some of the components behind the end papers. So next stage, I start putting it all together. Now the nice thing about LilyPad Arduino is that it doesn't use a soldering iron and solder. It uses conductive thread and a needle. So to make a connection between things, all you need to do is sew the components together. And this works really nicely on paper. So next stage, I then, underneath these end papers, I make sure there's electrical tape beneath because you don't want the connections to cross at all, so make sure it's all nice and safely done. And then finally, the book's ready to go. And so I test it, I bug fix it. And at this stage, the book is connected up to a laptop. So it's actually talking to the laptop via a USB. And once I've tested everything, and I'm pretty sure it works okay, then I sew everything together, put it all flat down, it's done. So for this particular book, I made this for a friend. This is a fairy tales book I found. And I decided I'd use blue LED lights because it worked really well with the cover and it felt kind of a little bit magical. And the friend I made it for, she said something really interesting about it. She said, "Do you know, it feels like the book is with me and knows that I've picked it up. It feels a bit like a story." So I thought that was a really interesting kind of response to that. But making books in this way, remaking books, isn't something that's new. In fact, it's been going on for a very long time. This particular book is from about 1490, and it's been remade with paper dials, paper wheels in it. And this can be used basically as a calculator for the reader to know what the date is, so it's a calendar. But it's not just books remade with paper. So this is also an old book, but this has been remade with cogs, with wooden cogs in the middle of it. Now, I think the author had made this book so that the reader would be able to find a key number using these cogs and divine something of the future. So I'm not sure how successful that will be, but it is a beautiful object. It's really lovely. And the things about these books, they're called volvels. The things about these books, they tell the reader something about the world around them. And I think that's a difference from what I'm making with books. What I'm doing with my books when I'm remaking them is not telling the reader something about the world around them, but it's telling the reader something about the state that that book is in. So I've been thinking about this idea and about using lights, and I thought, well, rather than using lights when you pick up the book, how about instead of that, you navigate a story using gesture. So you pick up a book, and instead it will tell you a story. So I started playing around with this idea, and this is my first prototype, and it's not very pretty, but what it does, it sort of tested this idea of could you navigate a story by moving a book by gesture. So what you've got on the book here, you've still got the LilyPad Arduino on one side, and the accelerometer, which lets you know which way around the book is. And then on the other side, you've got a mobile phone. And what this phone does, this plays out the audio story. But to do that, it needs to know what sort of state, what gesture the book's in at that particular point. So it needs to get the data over. So you could put a wire between the two, but actually that's a bit messy, and it means you can't really move the book around. So what I needed to do was create a wireless network between the book and the mobile phone. And this means then the phone's constantly getting data from the book, and it knows the orientation of the book. So therefore it knows what piece of audio to play in response to that. So this is what it looks like.
My spine is upwards. I'm standing on my head. Stop putting me on my spine. I'm asleep. I'm lying on my stomach. Upright.
So all that's happening there is that the book knows which way around it is. It's telling the phone which way around, and the phone therefore knows which piece of audio to play in response to what's happening, so whatever the reader's doing. So the latest version that I've got of this uses a copy of Treasure Island, and I looked for a long time to find the right book. I found this copy of Treasure Island in a cafe, and I did ask the owner before I took it. I didn't just walk out with it. But it's a beautiful book. It's hardcover, and it's got a really big space down the spine. So one of the things I really wanted to try with this was to hide some of the components away. You'll see from the previous one, all the components are on the outside. So it works, but it's a bit messy. It's not really pretty. It's not readable as a book. So in this version, I've got the Arduino, and I've also got the accelerometer, and I've also got the large components there, which is creating the wireless network over to the phone. So then I can hide all these things away, and it becomes a readable book. But of course, the other really nice thing about a book talking to a phone is that the phone has the connection to the internet. So that means that the book can then start getting data from the internet, or throwing it back the other way as well. And on one level, you can then get the book to tweet by moving it as well. So as well as telling a story. And here's what that looks like.
So, a little about me. I'm Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson, published by Cassell. I've been told I'm old and dog-eared and my pages are yellowing, but there's life in me yet. Stand me upside down on my head and you'll see. Whee, that's fun! You all look very funny from this angle. Oh, I feel a bit dizzy. Can you stand me back up the right way, please? Much better, thank you. Oh, it's way past my bedtime, and this excitement has worn me out. Can you lie me flat on my front? Ooh. Lovely to see you all. I'm a bit tired, so I'm going to have a little sleep now. Good night.
So that gives you sort of an idea of what you can start doing when you've got that connection to the internet. And then I get upstaged by a book. So what I really want to do, and what I'm looking at doing next, is keeping the book as a readable object, because that's the thing I really like about it. I want to be able to pick up a book and have the things I love about it, but also have that technology hidden away further in the structure of the book. And one of the really nice things about keeping the book as a readable object is you can then start to run other stories through it as well. So you've got the audio story, but you've also got the little things, the things I love about old books, which is those small handwritten notes that previous readers have written in the margins. Or they might have left a little bookmark in there that's a train ticket, something like that. So it gives you something about their life, and you have a tiny insight into a stranger's life, and those are the things I love. So you can start running all these different things through the book and create lots of layers of stories. So when I start a project, I often start with thinking about, I wonder what happens if. So I guess my final point, what I want to leave you with is thinking, what are you curious about in the world? What do you look at and want to remake? So what do you look at and think, I wonder what happens if? Thanks very much.